So there's an easy way to find circumference and there's a hard way. Right now I'm going to show you the hard way. So I have this 10-inch tortilla here. Remember the diameter was 10 inches and I have a piece of string. Now, one way you can actually find circumference, which is a not particularly fun way, is you can actually wrap a piece of string around the outside. Now, you're going to notice right from the start that this is not easy, quite tough actually. And it's not going to be really accurate because you'll notice it's not perfectly around the edges. It's pretty good, but it's not perfect. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark off the outside of this string. I'm going to move my tortilla to the side and I'm going to lay my string flat down. Lay it flat down like so. And I want it to be in a straight line. And now basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a tape measure and I'm going to measure it. And I get right about 32 inches. And if you can come over and see that on here, right about 32 inches would be the circumference of that circle, based upon my measurement using this string. Now, we'll also see what that actual circumference would be if we use a little bit easier way to figure that out. But this is something that you can also try.
So looking back at our three tortillas here, I want to remind you that the largest of the three tortillas here had a diameter of 10 inches. The middle one here had a diameter of 8 inches, and the smallest tortilla had a diameter of 6 inches. Now, remember from our previous lesson, we had talked about how we can use the diameter to find the circumference because we said the circumference is just a little bit over 3 diameters, and that's true for any circle. Now, when I used that hard way with the piece of string, I actually found that the diameter of the biggest tortilla was right about 32 inches. Now, that's not going to be perfect because we did it with a piece of string, but we can come up with a better way. Now, I actually also did the same thing to the other two. I just didn't show you that. The center tortilla using the string, I came up with 25 inches, and the smallest tortilla, I came up with 20 inches. Now, we can actually figure out whether this is true or not by using something that we know about a circle. Now, remember that the number here on the bottom is the circumference, so I'm going to use a C for that. And the number here on top, which is our smaller number, is our diameter. Now, for any circle, there is a special number that we know about. And we find this number by taking the circumference and dividing by the diameter. And that gives us this number that is always true, pi. You may have heard about pi before. And we know that pi is about 3.14, and we'll talk a little bit more of that in a second. Now, one way we could show whether my measurements were good is we can actually take the circumference and divide by the diameter. So we'll use a calculator for that part. So we could take a calculator, and I'll put it up here. And for the first one, for instance, we could take 32 divided by 10, which hopefully you can do in your mind. Remember, dividing by 10 is just moving the decimal back once. And we get 3.2, which is pretty close to 3.14, just a little bit over that. For the second one, we would do 25 divided by 8, and we get 3.125, which again is really close to 3.14. And for the third one, 20 divided by 6, 3.33, which again is pretty close to 3.14. Now, the reason my measurements aren't exactly 3.14 is because I measured with a string, which wasn't a perfect measurement, obviously. And also, possibly, and you could probably see this, these tortillas aren't exactly circles. You'll notice this third tortilla definitely isn't exactly a circle, but it's pretty close. Now, one thing we can do with this is we can actually flip this around to make an easier way to find the circumference. If it's true that the circumference divided by the diameter equals pi, we can flip this around and say, well, if I take the diameter and multiply that by pi, that's always going to give me the circumference, which is pretty cool. Now, that means that basically, if I wanted to know the circumference, the actual circumference of my first tortilla here, I could just take the diameter, which is 10. I could multiply that by about 3.14. Remember, we said pi is just a little more than 3 because it takes a little more than 3 diameters to make the circumference. And that gives me about 31.4. So that tells me that my actual circumference of that first tortilla is about 31.4. And we can do that for any circle by taking the diameter and multiplying by the circumference. So this number pi is a part of every single circle that you've ever seen. And one thing about pi, notice I put here that it's approximately 3.14. That's because that number pi goes on forever, 3.14, and those digits are going to continually go on forever because it's not an exact number. But remember that this formula, taking the diameter and multiplying by pi, will always give you the circumference of a circle. And remember that pi can be found by taking the circumference and dividing by the diameter. So hopefully you have a little bit better understanding of what pi is.